Hello everyone, this is GamesWithFrank, and welcome to part 2 of the Cozy Exploration video game series with Unity and Playmaker. And I am at the same exact place where we've left off the first tutorial. And so in this video, I'll be looking at how to create dynamic cameras, right? So these dynamic cameras, I'll be showing like some clips regarding how exactly they work in games. I can think of multiple scenarios where these can be used, and Nightstones has a lot of like these cameras, and we'll be replicating a similar system. We cannot unfortunately make them without Cinemachine. So before we jump into the tutorial, I recommend you go to Window and Package Manager. Once you go to Package Manager, you can select the Unity registry here and search for Cinemachine. So if you have this one installed, it would also install Cinemachine. But we'll be looking at a timeline and sequences a little bit later in this series, where we'll need these for cutscenes if we are going for cutscenes. So I'll not be covering that in this tutorial. For now, you'll need Cinemachine though. So let's just quickly generate a small level. Right now it's just a plane, and I want some terrain kind of thing. Right. So I have these two textures with me, this one and this one. I'm gonna just save these two in my resources folder. I'm gonna create a textures folder inside the resources folder, and let's open that and paste my image. I'm gonna call it dirt, right? And that's that. And this is a horrendous option, but if you find a better option, then please go for it. I'm gonna just use like placeholder stuff. I'm gonna delete the plane. I'm gonna quickly add a terrain. No, I think that's too big for the game right now, but we could always change that here. Go to the last tab and say, let's remove 1 0. For now, I'll be using this terrain of 100 width and 100 length. So I'll quickly add, here we need to add a terrain layer, and call it grass. I should not have created the materials in the first place, my bad. And I'm gonna duplicate it and say dirt. Dirt is gonna have this one, and yeah, I think that should probably do it. So we have grass, and it looks horrific, but we should probably go with that. I'll just reduce the tiling, increase the tiling a little bit so that it looks a little bit decent. I think so. So that looks okay right now. I'm gonna quickly look at some of the reference here, and I'm gonna quickly paint. So that's about the level. I'm not gonna go much further than this. So what we are going to need from the scene is the camera. We need to override this with a Cinemachine camera. Once you've installed Cinemachine from the package manager, you should be able to right click in the hierarchy and you can see the Cinemachine camera options here. So we are going to look at, let's let's start with the virtual camera. It's just like the basic stuff where you can add or remove options as you need. So I'm gonna use this one and set the, with the camera selected, I can press my Control Shift and F keys in order to place the camera wherever I want. So this is going to be like this. So let's say we want the player to be visible in this angle throughout this path till the player reaches let's say this particular area. Let's just create a cube and let's just mark the area so that we have a reference for that one. So let's say if the player enters this particular area, then we need a different camera. And if the player is in this area of the map, then we'll need a different camera. I mean, like, this can be replicated in any to any number of times, but basically I'm just showing two different boxes. So I'll just remove the mesh renderer components from these. You can keep them disabled and like have them handy later on. Like if I undo and just disable it, that should be fine. So if I scale the thing now, it should still do that. And if you delete the mesh render, you can't do that usually. If I delete this, now you can't like scale. So the mesh filter is needed for sure. So let's say this is the zone 1. I'm gonna rename this to zone 1 and this is zone 2. And let's create a Cinemachine virtual camera. Let's say camera 1. And I want the camera to be around this particular area. I'm gonna zoom in a little bit, something like that, but it should follow the player like this. And for that one, we will be needing follow framing transposer, and I'm gonna delete the, we're not looking at aim, so I'm gonna put that to do nothing. And for the follow, we need player, so I'll click the player and drag it into the transform. So here I'm gonna increase the camera distance. I feel this much should be enough. And I'm gonna increase my look ahead time and look ahead smoothing. This will just ensure that your camera follows the player smoothly. And I also want the camera to be a little bit towards the upper side. So I'm gonna rotate in the scene view and press Ctrl Shift F wherever I think it is better. And I'll come down to the red zone area and increase this to a little bit, maybe that much. And I think that should do. So if I hit play, it should probably follow the player without rotating it. There we go. And it automatically zooms. We can have all types of like collision events. If the camera is colliding with the terrain here, it can either go up or bring it down. That can be added through an extension. It's called the Cinemachine confiner. So we'll be looking at that a little bit later, but for this tutorial, I think we'll be using this simple virtual camera where it's just doing the framing transposer. And if I activate the mesh render for the zone 2, so it's around this area, it looks like, yeah, so basically we need that to be a trigger. I forgot to make them triggers, so I'll just enable the ease trigger for both of them, and I'll go to zone 1. Actually, let's create the other camera as well. So the other camera, I need it to be looking from this side. So I'll create another camera and call it camera 2. Yep. Let's see if parenting to these things will make a difference. So that way it's more organized, I feel. But if that gives an issue, we'll just unparent them. So for zone 2, we'll activate camera 2, but the camera 2 will be looking at the player from this side. So just quickly add, maybe I'll increase the distance a little bit, maybe make it 30. Yeah, I think that should do. So I have 2 cameras and I want the priority in this one to be 0, and this one is currently at 10. So we'll be using the priority to switch between cameras. So that is the logic. We are also looking for how it blends between the camera. So we'll go to transitions and we'll see how it blends right now. We'll just make the code and then figure out how that's going to happen. So I'll just quickly add an FSM for the zone 2 and I'll call this camera switch. And if you're parenting the camera to the zone, the other advantage is that you can get the child. Let's say camera, actually get child, the next child. Or you can just say child number. It's child index 0 is the first child of the zone 2 game object. So I'm gonna store this as the camera. So here is a little bit, this is where it gets a little bit complicated because we are going to be making an object variable. If you're not familiar with object variables, I'll just explain while I create it. If I create a variable type called object and say this is my Cinemachine camera. So if I look at the camera, it's having the Cinemachine virtual camera component on it. So we need to access this particular component and set the priority based on that. So that's why we are creating an object variable type. And if you select the object type, you'll see that it's just set to object. And if we try getting the component from the child, let's say get component, and if I say Cinemachine camera, let's see what happens. So you can see that the error pops up saying that it needs the object type and you can't just use the object. So that's because we need to specify exactly what type of component we need from that particular game object. So if I go to Cinemachine, virtual camera, this variable is used. Are you going to change? Okay, yeah, that's because we already used it in the state one. So we need to change it to the Cinemachine. You can find it inside the Cinemachine drop down. If you go all the way to the bottom here, yeah. So we'll be getting the component from that one, and we'll be getting the child's Cinemachine camera component. And here, what we're gonna do is set property. And set property is used mostly with object variable types. And if I select the Cinemachine camera from this one and say priority, I'll just set this to 10. So there are other Cinemachine. Wait, if I lock this FSM and click and drag the Cinemachine virtual camera, you can set the property directly from here. But the whole idea is to make it dynamic so that if I copy this FSM and paste it on this one, it would take the first child of that, and you don't need to assign any variables whatsoever. So that becomes a dynamic kind of thing. So let's just see if this works. So we'll need to do this if the player enters this particular box. So I'll just select the player and send an event, change camera, and set this one as the start state. Wait for trigger. And make sure you change the tag on the player, and I'll just save the scene. So right now I have the camera in the zone 1. If I slowly move towards the other area, let's see what happens. There we go. So this one, if you see, it would have been transitioned into the other state. But if we go back to this area, we can't get our other camera back. That's because we need to have a system for that as well. So right now we are just triggering the event once the player enters this particular range. And once he exits, I'll just copy the trigger event and paste it here. Trigger exit. And let's create a finished state and put it back here. So I'll just copy these three and paste them here and set the priority to 0. Now let's say if I have another zone, and also I just want to quickly make a change. I think the distance for this one is too much. Let's make it 20 and maybe rotate it a little bit towards the side. So I'm gonna quickly go to the orthogonal view, and I'm gonna bring this down to half its size. And now I'm gonna quickly duplicate this and bring it like over here. So maybe like that. And I'll call this zone 3. And zone 3. You don't need to change the name of the camera. It will automatically take the child of the camera, so child of the zone. So that is not needed, but you need to like make sure the angle which you want is proper, and I'm gonna reduce the distance for this one even bit more, and then I'm gonna make the priority 0. So we are back to the first camera, and let me just save the scene. And since I duplicated the zone, it automatically duplicated the FSM. So I'm gonna hit play and let's see what happens. Now that transition I'm not a big fan of, but you can see that once we enter the zone, the camera changed back to the first one. So if I see the priority on the first one, it's 10, and 0 on 2 and 3. Yeah. Just to visualize this, I'm gonna turn back the zones mesh render. Let's see that. And I'm gonna quickly create a material. Actually, let's just use this one. I'm gonna make this transparent and maybe make it like a yellow color. Make it almost transparent. And I'm gonna use, yeah. So there you have it. So let's make another one. And this one will be maroon or some other different color. If I enter this zone, it would change the camera to that particular one. And do this one. But the transition from this camera to the red camera is a little bit too much. I would change that. So let's look at what's happening here. If you notice the change, you can mess around with the transitions. That looks more nice. So I think cylindrical looks a little bit more polished. So if I disable these two mesh renders again, and let's start from the beginning, and just to get a feel of like how it transitions. I start the game, I'm running towards my objective, and I need to see what's in the path. And it looks perfect. I hope you learned something new in this tutorial, and I'm sorry it was a really long one, and I'll see you in the next video. I have not planned what exactly I'll be covering in the next one, but I'll make sure I'll update through a video. And that's it from my side. This is Games with Frank signing out.